I'm going to talk about in this video this circuit which is called clicker, and it's an extension circuit for my Raspberry Pi video instrument Recur. So this functions as a custom keypad and MIDI controller which is designed to interface with Recur. So yeah, technically it could be used for anything, like it outputs key messages and MIDI messages, so anything could interface with it, but it's designed, the labels and the form factor is meant to be used with Recur. So it's mainly an option for people who already have Recurs or plan on building them. Recur is not currently available to purchase at this time, and there's no plans as of now for me to stock and sell them. So yeah, that's a fully DIY project. You're going to need to build that yourself, but there's lots of documentation and information about how to do that on the Recur GitHub repo, so you can have a look into there. So yeah, in this video I'm just going to first give a little bit of context about what Recur is. It's the way that I've been using Recur, and then talk about what this circuit kind of adds or replaces, or why you might want this instead of what you already have, or why you might not. We're just going to go through some of the pros and cons of this extension as well. Okay, so what you can see here are the three main parts that you would need if you were building a Recur. So those parts are a Raspberry Pi 3, a 3.5-inch Raspberry Pi display that connects via the GPIO, and a USB numpad. So this is this is how Recur is usually built, and then you put your you put the screen on the GPIO pins like this, and the numpad is connected via USB, wireless USB. It's the output is going to the television, and I've got a camcorder that's going into one of these EasyCap capture cards via USB into Recur. So what you're seeing on the TV now is the feed from the camcorder being passed through Recur into the television. So yeah, the default keyboard option, which is one of these USB numpads where the keys have been remapped to suit the Recur program. This works fine when you're triggering samples or using like the settings which require discrete button presses, but as Recur matured and more features were added, for example the shader effects and patterns, then it became clear that just discrete inputs weren't enough, and that some sort of continuous control over the parameters would be more useful. So for example, here we can put on an effect on the video feed, but if we want to change the parameters of this effect with just the numpad, we have to manually do this. So we can kind of change the things like this with these discrete steps, but that's less than ideal. So usually what I use when I'm performing with Recur is a USB MIDI controller, such as the Korg Nano Controller 2. And so in this case I would just plug the Nano controller into Recur, and then I can control the effect parameters with these sliders, and that's a much more natural way to control these kind of effects. So this would be kind of the setup I would use for recur. The keypad for all of the discrete controls, and another MIDI controller for the continuous controls. And that's fine. You actually can do all of the discrete kind of controls also on the Korg node controller. So I can change. I don't remember what the mapping is exactly, but I can move to different parts of here, and I can trigger samples and change different shaders just using these buttons. So I could take this out of the setup altogether, but I tend to use this anyway because I'm used to the way, and I have it mapped the way I like it. But yeah, these numpads have been a bit problematic for some people in the recur community. They will buy one of these and it won't work for whatever reason. Because these are just generic numpads, every one you buy, you don't know what the slight differences would be. So the ones that I've bought work fine for me, but other people report problems, and I can't really debug it or support it if I don't have the exact version that you're holding. So that's kind of the main reason that inspired me to develop a custom control for recur, because at least then I'm in control over the firmware and how it works. So while I was designing that, I also wanted to condense some of the other features that I needed for my setup, for example the continuous controls, into this custom numpad. So you can see here it has the 4 knobs, which you can use for shaders effects. It also has 4 CV, control voltage input, so that you can control these effects with an external sequencer or synthesizer. So yeah, combining, I guess, the numpad and the MIDI controller, and giving a way to get CV input in there as well. That's what Clicker is about. So I can show you an example of this. So now I can navigate and choose a different effect. Maybe we want to do, let's find that colorizer. Here we go. Is that moving so fast? Yeah, that looks better now, I think. There we go. You can set the colors there. So yeah, this is more or less how Clicker works. There's not really that much to show. It just behaves as you would expect. So yeah, the buttons output key presses, and the knobs and CVs output MIDI, but this can be customized in the firmware. So you could edit the open source firmware so that the keys output MIDI messages, for example, as well. And you could use this as like a full MIDI controller, or CV to MIDI adapter. The other extension that I have available for recur, which is incur. There's another video that talks about this in more detail, but just so you can see them side by side. Incur also gives you 4 knobs for shader control and 4 control voltage inputs. So you really don't need both of these things. It's kind of a one or the other, but they do it slightly different ways. So incur, this reads the inputs and inputs it directly to the GPIO on the Raspberry Pi, whereas the Clicker goes through the microcontroller, which converts it to MIDI. So this only works for recur because it's like hardwired, whereas the Clicker is slightly more flexible, can be used in other contexts because it uses MIDI, which is a protocol that's accepted by lots of instruments. So that's one of the differences. The other difference is that Clicker obviously has the numpad included on the circuit. Incur only has the knobs, and it also has the MIDI serial and the break. Some reasons why you might want to use Clicker in your setup is because you want to input control voltage into recur, and you don't already have an incur that does this. That's one reason. Another reason is that you want like a concise and compact form factor with all of the recur labels already included on the board, and have everything in one place, the buttons and the knobs and the CV. And finally, maybe you want to learn a bit about DIY, you want to build it yourself, or you want to have a look into the code. And some reasons why you might not want it: if you already have one of these numpads and it's working just fine for you, then there's no need to replace it. If you already have a Korg Nano controller or a good MIDI controller that's dedicated to your recur, then yeah, you don't need this as well. This is just an option instead of these things. So yeah, it's not really for everyone. If you don't have any need for example, the control voltage inputs, then maybe a Korg Nano controller that can do the discrete and the continuous ones with more knobs and faders might be a better option. But yeah, just to give you some options, that's what this is about.